My name's Marcella Banowitz, but they call me Sally. And I was Sal Kilberg, known at home. I was born the 18th of October in 1925 to Dominic Kilberg, Florence Wise. They were my parents. I was fifth oldest in a family of 13. The only thing I remember my folks telling me is that I was the first one born in the house that Dad built. And he was building the barn when it was time for me to be born. And my mother went out and called him in. The doctor came to the house. That was Dr. Moulton. I remember that. My dad was quite strict. He just didn't trust his path too often, but my mother was real mellow. When I was young, it seems like the older ones helped take care of the little ones, and we all had our chores to do, so there wasn't too much time to bug one another. Back then, we didn't have gas or electricity. We had a wooden cook stove, and at night, we always had to carry the wood and carry the chunks for the heating stoves, take the ashes out. In the summertime, we always had to help with making hay, and I drove the horse on the hay fork a lot of times, and many times I went up in the hay mow to help mow the hay with my brother. We had lamps that the chimneys had to be washed every Saturday, and I am so surprised that we didn't have more accidents with them. But every now and then one got tipped over when the boys got too rowdy. I don't remember fighting with any of my brothers and sisters, but my brothers sure got on my nerves a lot of times. They would just throw some smelly stuff in the separator house when you had to scrub that out to make the water smell so bad. We girls kind of got upset with them, but I don't ever remember any of the kids having a broken bone or nothing, so we were very lucky. I remember our bicycle was very precious to us. We could go the half a mile to get the mail with it. We thought that was a big treat. When I started going to school, we didn't have preschool or kindergarten. We just started in the first grade. And one thing I remember is it was a country schoolhouse, and it was a mile that we walked, and we had to get our chores done in the morning before we went. And several years there were like 20 in our school, one-room schoolhouse, and 18 of them were first cousins. And if it got real nasty snowstorm or something, every now and then we could stay at my uncle and aunt. They only lived a short distance from the school, and that was a big treat. I liked school. I wasn't the smartest, but I wasn't the dumbest either, and it was always interesting listening to the grades above you because it was a one-room schoolhouse, and you could always listen to the other classes, so a lot of times you knew the next grade before you even were in it. I liked spelling and reading. I did not like history or geography. I thought I'd never get to see any of those places anyhow. Why learn about them? But now I think they would be very interesting. When I was young, the influences in my life I know was our pastor, because he was there for many years. He was the pastor that I made my communion with, and we had a strict catechism teacher. And she was a very nice lady, but she was very strict. And I guess the stricter they are, the more you admire them after you are older. One thing we were taught to do is to respect our elders, no matter who they were. And you did not talk back to your parents. In our spare time, we usually did embroidery. I like to embroider. I still like to sew. We played games like, I know Mill was one of our favorite ones. You played it with buttons, and you just made it out of a piece of cardboard, so it was real simple. And at night we usually read the paper or book or embroidered. On rainy days, I know when we weren't in school or snowy days, we did embroidering. In those days, it was so different than what it would be now because we didn't have television or anything like that to occupy our time. When I learned to drive, my older brothers worked in the timber, and they would let me drive the Model T truck in the field to go to work, and I thought that was great. And it had a stick shift, and I don't know if I could drive a stick shift now, but it was a big treat when you got to drive the truck to go into the timber to make wood.
Sweet Sally.
In the summertime, we usually had 2 weeks of vacation school. That was Bible study nowadays, and that was just a half a day. And when we got home, we worked in the garden. I remember picking strawberries by the dishpan full, and then we'd can them and have them in the winter time. Our fun time was when Sunday or evening came and we could ride the bike, or in the winter time go sleigh riding after chores were done. We always enjoyed doing that. In the summertime, I think mostly we just saw friends every Sunday. Either we'd have family at our house for dinner or we were invited out to one of the relatives, and we really looked forward to Sundays. Saturday night was my favorite night because you knew the next day was Sunday. When we graduated from 8th grade, we'd always go to the county seat, and all the different country schools would get there, and all the 8th graders graduated the same day. And that was a big day because we got to eat our dinner out, which we hardly ever ate outside the home otherwise except on Sundays. And when we were teenagers, we'd go to dances. That was our biggest recreation. But we weren't allowed to go to too many a month. Probably the first I dated was in 42 or 3, I don't even remember. And I met Paul, my husband, at one dance, and his best friend was dating my cousin, so he asked me for a date, and he took me home one night, and it wasn't sitting real good with my father because we were told that the way you go to a dance is how you come home, and I just didn't follow his rule that night, and I heard about it the next day. And whenever we'd come home from a dance or something, if we sat in the car too long, you just knew my dad would be going to check the hogs because he just knew we were out there. Paul left to go to service in 44, and then he didn't come back until 46. After he got home from the service, we talked about getting married and rented a farm. Before I was married, they had a shower for me, and that day I had 103 temperature, but I went. In the morning I got married, I had 101 temperature yet, but I felt not too bad all day long. And when we came out of church, they were throwing rice, and I thought it was snowing. It was the 30th of October. Our wedding was at home. There was probably about 80, 90 people there. We had a wedding dance, and I sure didn't feel good at that. And I danced with my brother-in-law the last dance, and I couldn't hardly walk, let alone dance, and if I couldn't have hung on to him, I think I'd have went to the floor. I went to bed that night, and I was in bed all day Thursday. We got married on a Wednesday, and I was in bed all day Thursday, and Friday morning at 4 o'clock they operated for a ruptured appendix. The next 1st of March we moved on to this farm, but it seems like we were there a couple of years, and then it got sold and a relative got on it, and we moved in 46. We were on that farm till Judy and Alice were born there. We moved many times. We had 15 children. Judy was number 1, and Alice was the second one, and Dolores was number 3. Lloyd was 4, and Steve was 5. Alan was 6. Mary was 7. Marv was 8. And Dick was 9. Debbie was 10. Annette was 11. Leon is 12, and we know Dean is 13. And Randy is 14, and Patty was number 15. When the kids were growing up, they did a lot of things that we weren't aware of then, but as they grew older, they would tell us about it. Dolores, she and Lloyd were pals together, and if something was wrong, you always checked on them first before you would see if one of the other kids did it. And Debbie, one time, she wore Annette wore Debbie's pajamas, so Debbie snuck out, and she thought we wouldn't know it because Annette was laying in her bed with her pajamas on. But they always come and tell you those things after it doesn't matter anymore anyhow. People would get a chuckle out of that. I was always told whatever didn't matter 20 years from now, don't let it bother you at the present time, because like my brother-in-law always said, that too shall pass. But so often I wanted to ask him, but how soon? One of my favorite times that I always look forward to is when Paul was working in a factory, and he'd always take his vacation the last week in June because that was our National Square Dance Convention. Now, we were active in square dancing, and it was great just to get away from the kids for a bit, but then you were just as anxious to get back home again as you were leaving. After Patty was born, I started quilting more, and I have quilted ever since. I've made hundreds of quilts, I know. After having 15 children, there are 40 plus grandkids now and 20 plus great grandkids. So I better keep making more baby blankets or I'll run out one of these days, because they all got a baby blanket, the grandkids and great grandkids, when they were born. And when they graduate from high school, they've all gotten a quilt. Another hobby that I've had is I've baked many apple pies in the fall. The most I ever made was a few over 700 one fall. And another thing I'd love doing is playing cards. I've got a computer now, and just about every night before I go to bed, I have to play a couple games of euchre, but then a couple games go on to a few more games, and sometimes I should go to bed a little earlier than I do, but I guess that too shall pass. Ever since I was out of 8th grade, I've kept a diary, so that's been since 1939. When I get old, I want to read all of them. So one of these days, I'll get them out and check them out. For the last how many years, I've gone down to Texas every winter and stayed with Judy and some friends down there. Have a lot of friends down there now. As you get older, you've realized how grateful you are for family and friends, and just not to take everything for granted. It's great to have friends. Over the years, we've had many family gatherings, reunions and weddings and parties and everything else, and I've even enjoyed going motorcycle riding with the kids some Sunday afternoons.
All you wanna do is ride around Saturday.
When I was young, I don't remember daydreaming, only when I'd lay out in the sunshine and then you'd lay there and just daydream. But I didn't really daydream about anything in particular, just enjoying the outside. I don't remember ever making birthday cakes, really. We made some for my grandmother. She lived to be about 90 years old, and we'd always make an angel food cake with candles for her. But for our own, I don't remember that we always had birthday cakes. We knew it was our birthdays, but maybe we were favored a little bit, but we never had birthday cake or birthday parties. One I'll never forget is my 70th birthday. But before that, I don't really think I had a special birthday. 70th birthday party. They told me about it in May and my birthday was in October. And there were some special friends there and we had a polka mass. And then they had a big ballroom reserved. There must have been about 200 people there. I'll never forget that one. Then 10 years later, they had an 80th birthday party. They told me about it because I went too good on surprises. And there was a lot of people there too then. And just having all the kids home for it was a big treat. When the kids were growing up, at one time I wondered, what will I do with all of you? And now I don't know what I'd do without them. And I enjoy every one of them. And the grandkids and great-grandkids are as important as anybody else. I enjoy every one of them. And I will always remember those times.
All you